While I was pregnant, my sister-in-law was arrested for pretending to be a child services agent to harass and intimidate me, all because she secretly planned to take my baby for herself. Even after serving time, she violated her restraining order and showed up at my door like nothing happened. I'm Jessica, 28, and I need to share a deeply unsettling experience from my pregnancy journey. My husband, Oscar, 29, and I have been together for 6 years, married for 3. We reside in a modest ranch house in Ohio, which we acquired 2 years ago. Oscar is an electrician, and I teach 2nd grade at our local elementary school. When we discovered I was expecting our first child, we were ecstatic. We had been trying for 8 months, and the positive test finally arrived in January. Oscar immediately began transforming our spare room into a nursery. He painted the walls a cheerful yellow, as we intended to keep the baby's gender a surprise. For 2 months, every weekend was dedicated to constructing a crib from scratch and installing childproof latches on all the cabinets. The pregnancy progressed smoothly until the 32nd week. That's when everything began to unravel, though I was unaware of it at the time. Let me pause to explain something crucial about Oscar. When he was 19, he was apprehended for what appeared to be car theft. In reality, his friend Jake had borrowed his older brother's car without permission, and Oscar was not privy to this. They were pulled over, and both faced charges. Oscar accepted a plea deal for misdemeanor theft and completed 100 hours of community service. This incident occurred 9 years ago. Since then, Oscar has not even received a speeding ticket. He even abstains from alcohol, stating he learned a valuable lesson. The unsettling incident happened on a Thursday afternoon in March. I had just returned home from my final parent-teacher conferences before spring break. I was utterly exhausted, my feet swollen, and was resting on the couch when a knock echoed at our front door. The knocking was loud and insistent, unlike a neighbor or a delivery person. I opened the door to a woman who appeared to be in her 50s. She wore a navy blue blazer and carried a brown leather folder. She introduced herself as Margaret from the Department of Children's Services. She stated she needed to speak with Oscar and me regarding a report they had received. Margaret elaborated that someone had contacted their hotline, alleging Oscar was using illicit substances in our residence, posing a risk to our unborn child. She referenced his prior arrest, emphasizing that all reports were taken seriously, particularly with a criminal history. I invited her inside, confident we had nothing to conceal. Oscar arrived home from work about 20 minutes later, finding us seated at our kitchen table. Margaret had been inquiring about Oscar's work schedule, our financial situation, and any behavioral changes I might have noticed in him. When Oscar entered, his work boots were muddy, and his uniform had electrical tape adhering to it. Margaret observed him closely, making notes in her folder. She asked him to sit and began questioning him about his daily routine. She wanted to know his whereabouts after work, his acquaintances, and if he had been in contact with Jake, the friend from his arrest. Oscar responded calmly to every query. He clarified that he returns directly home after work each day. His lunch break is spent at the job site with his colleagues. On weekends, he focuses on home improvement projects or we visit his parents, who live approximately 40 minutes away. He hasn't communicated with Jake in over 5 years. Margaret then declared her need to inspect our house. She moved through every room, opening closets and drawers. In the nursery, she scrutinized the crib Oscar had constructed and asked why we had chosen not to determine the baby's gender. She examined our medicine cabinet and inquired about the prenatal vitamins I was taking. Following the inspection, Margaret informed us that we both required immediate drug tests. She mentioned a laboratory across town that remained open until 8 p.m., and we needed to go that very day. We drove there separately, Oscar in his work truck and me following in our car. The drug testing process took about an hour. We waited in a small room with plastic chairs while our samples were processed. Oscar repeatedly checked his phone and tapped his foot on the linoleum floor. I completed paperwork concerning my pregnancy and listed all my current medications. Margaret contacted me 3 days later while I was at school. I had to step out of my classroom during lunch to take the call. She stated that both our drug tests yielded negative results, and the home inspection revealed no concerns. I began to express my gratitude when she abruptly interrupted me. She said that despite the clean tests, there remained a high probability that the hospital would place a hold on our baby upon its birth. She explained that due to Oscar's criminal record and the nature of the initial report, other agencies might become involved. She clarified it wouldn't be her decision and that we would have to await developments at the hospital. I sat in my empty classroom after that call, gazing at the bulletin board adorned with my students' artwork. The baby kicked forcefully against my ribs, as if trying to get my attention. That night, sleep eluded me. Oscar snored beside me, but Margaret's words replayed in my mind. At 2 a.m., I rose and went to our computer. I located an online legal advice forum and meticulously typed out our entire narrative. Responses began arriving within minutes. Most individuals advised me to secure legal representation immediately. Several users claimed to work in child services or knew people who did. They highlighted inconsistencies in Margaret's visit. One person noted that in Ohio, child services typically does not investigate pregnant women unless they already have children in their care. Another stated that hospitals cannot simply take babies without a court order or clear evidence of immediate danger. Multiple individuals suggested I confirm Margaret's actual employment with the department. I printed out the most helpful responses and presented them to Oscar when he awoke. He reviewed them while sipping his coffee and consuming the scrambled eggs I had prepared. Upon finishing, he set the papers aside and declared we needed to contact a lawyer that morning. Oscar's uncle had previously utilized a family lawyer named Robert Chin for his divorce a few years prior. I telephoned Mr. Chin's office as soon as they opened and explained our urgent situation. His secretary managed to fit us in for an appointment that afternoon. Mr. Chin listened to our account without interruption. He took notes on a yellow legal pad and requested we reiterate certain specifics. When we concluded, he remarked that the entire situation seemed highly irregular for our state. The first action Mr. Chin took was to call the local Department of Children's Services office. He clarified that he was representing us and requested to speak with the supervisor regarding our case. He provided our names and inquired about the investigation purportedly handled by Margaret. Mr. Chin activated the speakerphone so we could listen. After being on hold for several minutes, the supervisor returned to the line. She stated they had no employee named Margaret in their department. She also confirmed they had no open case involving our family and had never received any reports about us. Mr. Chun thanked the supervisor and ended the call. He looked at both of us and instructed us to go to the police station immediately. Someone had been impersonating a government official, which was a serious offense. We drove directly to the police station from Mr. Chin's office. The officer who took our report was Detective Williams. She had us describe Margaret in detail: her height, hair color, the type of vehicle she drove, and her exact statements during the visit. Detective Williams explained that impersonating a public servant was a felony in Ohio. She assured us they would commence an investigation immediately and asked us to call without delay if Margaret attempted to contact us again. That evening, I contacted my obstetrician's office and spoke with the nurse. I explained the circumstances and requested they make a note in my file about the imposter. The nurse confirmed she would alert hospital security and ensure our delivery team was aware of the potential threat. We also decided to stay at Oscar's parents' house until after the baby's arrival. We packed our hospital bags and drove to their residence that night. Oscar's mother, Linda, prepared the guest room and insisted on making us dinner, despite us having already eaten. Our daughter, Emma, was born 2 weeks later at the hospital. The security team had Margaret's description and maintained extra vigilance in the maternity ward. Emma arrived healthy after a prolonged but typical labor. Oscar wept when he held her for the first time, which brought tears to my eyes as well. We remained at the hospital for 2 days, then returned to Oscar's parents' home. Linda had equipped the guest room with a bassinet and all necessary baby supplies. She assisted me in learning to breastfeed and demonstrated to Oscar how to properly change diapers. 3 days after Emma's birth, Detective Williams called with an update. They had apprehended someone in connection with our case. She stated we needed to come to the station to identify the suspect in a lineup. Update 1. The individual they arrested was someone I never anticipated. It was my sister-in-law, Kelly, 26, Oscar's younger sister. When Detective Williams revealed the suspect's name, Oscar simply stared at her. He asked her to repeat it, believing he must have misheard. But she confirmed it was Kelly who had been impersonating the child services worker. Kelly had been arrested at her apartment across town. The police discovered the navy blazer and brown folder she had used during her visit to our house. They also found printed pages containing information about child services procedures that she had apparently researched online. During questioning, Kelly confessed to everything. She admitted to being the one who called the child services hotline to make the false report about Oscar's alleged drug use. She had also been the one who came to our house pretending to be Margaret. Detective Williams explained that Kelly's motive was complex. According to her confession, Kelly believed that Oscar was unprepared for fatherhood due to his past arrest. She thought that if child services became involved, we would realize our lack of readiness for a baby and consider alternative options. Kelly also admitted that she had been experiencing financial difficulties and had hoped that if we chose not to keep the baby, she could adopt it herself. She had been attempting to conceive with her boyfriend for over a year without success and had been consulting a fertility specialist. Oscar remained silent during the meeting with Detective Williams. He simply sat in the plastic chair, looking at his hands. When we returned to his parents' house, he went directly to the guest room and closed the door. Linda was in the kitchen, feeding Emma a bottle, when I informed her of what had transpired. She set the bottle down on the counter and sank heavily into one of the kitchen chairs. She expressed disbelief that Kelly would commit such an act. Oscar's father, Frank, arrived home from work about an hour later. Linda told him about Kelly's arrest while he was still standing in the doorway, lunch cooler in hand. Frank set the cooler down and went to find Oscar in the guest room. I could hear their muffled conversation through the closed door, but I couldn't discern the words. Frank's voice was low and steady, and Oscar's responses were brief. They spoke for about 30 minutes before Frank emerged. The following day, Linda visited Kelly in jail. She was absent for most of the afternoon and returned looking weary. She reported that Kelly had been crying and repeatedly expressed her remorse. Kelly claimed she never intended for things to escalate to such an extent. According to Linda, Kelly had only planned to make the initial phone call to child services. She thought they would simply conduct a quick check and then close the case. But when nothing happened after a few days, she decided to take matters into her own hands. Kelly had researched child services procedures online and found old employee directories to fabricate her false identity. She had rehearsed her statements and even purchased the blazer and folder at a thrift store to appear more credible. Linda said Kelly kept asking if Oscar and I would visit her in jail. She wished to explain herself and apologize in person. Linda informed her that was unlikely to occur anytime soon. Oscar finally began discussing the situation with his parents after Linda's jail visit. He expressed feeling foolish for not recognizing his own sister, even though she had styled her hair differently and used an altered tone of voice during her visit. Frank pointed out that individuals do not expect family members to engage in such elaborate deception. He stated that Oscar had no reason to question whether Margaret was genuinely a government worker because the notion that it could be Kelly was so far beyond the realm of possibility. We remained at Oscar's parents' house for another week while we deliberated our next steps. Emma was sleeping soundly and gaining weight, which the pediatrician confirmed was ideal. Oscar and I discussed whether we wished to pursue charges against Kelly. The district attorney indicated we could opt not to prosecute since it was a family matter, but Detective Williams advised us to proceed with the prosecution. The charges against Kelly included impersonating a public servant, filing a false report, and harassment. If convicted, she could face up to 3 years in prison and substantial fines. Linda asked us to consider Kelly's mental state and her struggles with infertility. She suggested that Kelly might benefit more from counseling than incarceration. Frank disagreed, asserting that Kelly needed to face consequences for her actions. Oscar made the decision to proceed with pressing charges. He stated that Kelly's actions were not merely a prank or a misunderstanding. She had terrorized us during the final weeks of my pregnancy and jeopardized our family. We returned to our own house when Emma was 3 weeks old. Oscar installed new locks on all the doors and purchased a security camera for the front porch. He said he wanted to ensure Kelly could not return and attempt anything else. Kelly's trial was scheduled for 2 months later. The public defender assigned to her case contacted us regarding the possibility of a plea deal. Kelly was willing to plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. Update 2. Kelly's trial took place on a Tuesday morning in May. Oscar and I had to testify about what transpired during her visit to our house and how her actions impacted us. Kelly pleaded guilty to all charges as part of her plea agreement. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in prison with the possibility of parole after serving half the sentence. She was also required to pay restitution for our legal fees and attend counseling sessions. During the sentencing hearing, Kelly's lawyer requested permission for her to make a statement. Kelly stood up and apologized to Oscar and me. She expressed awareness that her actions were wrong and regretted putting us through such a difficult period. Kelly explained that she had been desperate to have a baby and had not been thinking clearly. She said the fertility treatments had been affecting her emotionally, leading to poor decisions. She asked Oscar to forgive her someday, even if not immediately. Oscar did not respond to Kelly's statement in court. When the judge asked if we wished to say anything, Oscar simply shook his head. I informed the judge that we appreciated Kelly's apology, but her actions had caused lasting harm to our family. After the sentencing, Linda approached us in the courthouse hallway. She said she understood if we needed space from the family for a while. She inquired if she could still visit Emma occasionally, as she did not wish to lose her relationship with her granddaughter. Oscar told his mother that she was welcome to visit Emma anytime. He stated that Kelly's actions were not Linda's fault, and he did not want Emma to miss out on a relationship with her grandmother. Frank was less understanding of the situation. He said Kelly had disgraced the family and made it difficult for everyone to move forward. He ceased visiting Kelly in jail after her sentencing and refused to discuss her release date. We learned more details about Kelly's planning during the trial. The prosecution presented evidence that she had been researching our case for weeks before making the initial phone call to child services. Kelly had created fake social media accounts to monitor our posts about the pregnancy. She had also driven by our house multiple times to observe our daily routines. The level of premeditation involved in her scheme was more extensive than we had initially realized. The most unsettling revelation was that Kelly had been in contact with adoption agencies in other states. She had inquired about private adoptions and asked about the process for adopting a baby whose birth parents changed their minds. Kelly's boyfriend, Marcus, testified that he had no knowledge of her plans. He said Kelly had been behaving oddly for several months, but he attributed it to stress from their fertility treatments. Marcus ended his relationship with Kelly after her arrest and moved out of their shared apartment. Detective Williams informed us that Kelly's case was unusual because family members rarely go to such elaborate lengths to deceive each other. She said most impersonation cases involve strangers attempting to commit fraud or gain access to homes for theft. The stress of the trial affected Oscar's relationship with his parents. Linda continued to visit Kelly in prison and wished to discuss Kelly's appeals process with Oscar. Frank believed Linda was enabling Kelly's behavior by maintaining contact with her. Oscar told his parents that he did not want updates about Kelly or discussions about her situation. He said he needed to focus on his own family and could not handle constant reminders of what had occurred. Linda respected Oscar's wishes, but we could tell she was struggling with the division in her family. She had always been close to both of her children and did not know how to navigate the circumstances. Emma continued to grow and develop normally throughout this period. She began sleeping through the night at 8 weeks old and started smiling responsively around 10 weeks. These milestones provided some positive focus during an otherwise challenging time. I returned to work when Emma was 12 weeks old. My principal and fellow teachers had been supportive throughout the situation. Several colleagues brought meals during Emma's first few weeks and offered to assist with childcare if needed. Oscar's work relationships were more complicated because some of his coworkers knew about Kelly's arrest through local news coverage. The story had been reported in the newspaper with headlines about fake government workers. Oscar found it embarrassing to discuss and tried to avoid conversations about his family. Kelly was scheduled to be eligible for parole after serving 9 months of her sentence. The parole board would consider factors including her behavior in prison and her completion of required counseling sessions. Update 3. Kelly was released on parole in September after serving 10 months in prison. She was required to complete community service hours and continue attending counseling sessions as conditions of her release. Linda informed us of Kelly's release, even though Oscar had requested not to receive updates about her. Linda said she felt we should know because Kelly was living back in town, and we might encounter her at stores or other public places. Kelly found employment at a grocery store on the other side of town. She was residing in a small apartment and had to check in with her parole officer twice a week. According to Linda, Kelly was adhering to all the requirements of her parole and had not caused any issues. 2 weeks after Kelly's release, she appeared at our house on a Saturday afternoon. Oscar was in the backyard repairing our fence when she knocked on the front door. I was inside with Emma, who was 6 months old by then. I looked through the window and saw Kelly standing on our front porch. She appeared thinner than before, and her hair was shorter. She was holding a small gift bag and kept looking around nervously. I did not open the door. Instead, I called Oscar's name, and he came running from the backyard. When he saw Kelly through the window, he instructed me to call the police. He stated her presence at our house violated the restraining order we had filed as part of her plea agreement. Kelly saw Oscar through the window and began speaking loudly. She said she merely wanted to give Emma a gift and apologize in person. She placed the gift bag on our doorstep and said she would depart if we would just listen to her for 5 minutes. Oscar opened the door but did not invite Kelly inside. He informed her that she was not permitted at our house and needed to leave immediately. Kelly said she had been thinking about us every day in prison and needed us to know how truly sorry she was. Kelly asked if she could see Emma, even if only for a moment. She said she had purchased a stuffed animal and wanted Emma to have it. Oscar told Kelly that she would never have any relationship with Emma and that she needed to accept that reality. The conversation lasted about 10 minutes before Kelly finally left. She took the gift bag with her when she walked back to her car. Oscar watched from the window until she drove away, then contacted the police to report the violation. Kelly's parole officer contacted us the next day to discuss the incident. She said Kelly would face additional restrictions and potential jail time for violating the restraining order. Kelly claimed she did not comprehend that bringing a gift constituted contact. The parole officer recommended that Kelly be required to move to a different county as a condition of continuing her parole. Kelly agreed to relocate rather than return to prison. She moved about 2 hours away and found another job at a restaurant. Oscar's relationship with his parents became strained after Kelly's visit to our house. Linda had given Kelly our address when Kelly expressed a desire to send Emma a card. Linda did not believe Kelly would actually show up in person. Frank was angered by Linda's action of providing Kelly with our address. He said Linda needed to choose between supporting Kelly and maintaining a relationship with Oscar and Emma. Linda stated she could not choose between her children and wished to assist both of them. Oscar decided that his parents could no longer visit Emma unsupervised. He said Linda had demonstrated she could not be trusted to respect our boundaries regarding Kelly. Linda was distressed by this decision but agreed to the supervised visits. We began having Linda and Frank over for dinner once a month instead of the weekly visits we had been doing. The dinners were pleasant, but an underlying tension always existed regarding the topics we could not discuss. Emma celebrated her first birthday in October with a small party at our house. We invited Oscar's parents, my parents, and a few close friends. Kelly was not mentioned during the celebration, but I noticed Linda looking sad when Emma opened her presents. Kelly sent a birthday card to Emma through Linda, but we returned it unopened. Oscar told his mother that all communication from Kelly needed to cease completely. Linda said she understood, but asked if there might be a future time when forgiveness would be possible. Oscar told Linda that he could not envision ever having a relationship with Kelly again. He said that what she had done was not merely a mistake or poor judgment, but a calculated scheme to harm our family. The extent of deception involved made it impossible for him to trust her again. Currently, Emma is 14 months old and mobile. She speaks a few words and enjoys playing with blocks and stuffed animals. She knows nothing about what transpired before her birth, and we intend to keep it that way for now. Kelly has remained away from our area since her relocation. Her parole will conclude next summer, and she will no longer be required to check in with an officer. We hope that the physical distance and time will help her move forward with her life without involving our family. Oscar and I do not discuss Kelly anymore unless something demands our attention, such as legal updates or parole violations. We concentrate on raising Emma and nurturing our own relationship. The experience taught us to trust our instincts and question things that do not seem right, even when they involve family members. Linda still communicates with Kelly occasionally, but she does not share details with us. Frank has not spoken to Kelly since her sentencing and states he does not plan to have a relationship with her in the future. The family will probably never be the same as it was before, but we have accepted that reality and moved forward with our lives. Now, let's move to the next story. Story 2. My father demanded I cancel my wedding because my husband had a tumor. When I refused, he demanded I repay every penny he ever spent on me. I, 28, married my husband, Jack, 31, last month. My father, David, 56, has always been a challenging individual to interact with. Growing up, he consistently made everything about himself. My childhood was filled with instances where he transformed every situation into a narrative about his own struggles or accomplishments. When I was 8, I won a school art competition. Instead of celebrating my achievement, Dad spent the entire evening recounting to everyone at the celebratory dinner how he once was a talented artist but had to abandon his aspirations to support his family. He even retrieved his old sketches and made everyone examine them while my awards lay forgotten on the table. My parents' marriage was strained throughout my childhood. Mom attempted to shield me from their arguments, but I often overheard Dad shouting about her supposed lack of appreciation for his sacrifices. He would storm out after these disputes and disappear for days, only to return with expensive gifts and behave as if nothing had occurred. When I was 12, Mom finally had enough and initiated divorce proceedings. Dad made the entire divorce about himself, telling anyone who would listen how he was the victim of a cruel wife who failed to comprehend him. The divorce was contentious. Dad used me as a pawn to retaliate against Mom. He would promise to take me on trips or purchase items for me, then cancel at the last minute, alleging Mom had somehow prevented him from fulfilling his promises. He would then spend hours on the phone with his friends and family, lamenting how the divorce was destroying his relationship with his daughter. Mom never spoke ill of him to me, but I could see the impact of his behavior on her. When I was 15, Dad married Sarah, 45. Sarah was distinct from Mom. She seemed to possess an understanding of how to manage Dad's narcissistic tendencies. She would skillfully redirect conversations when he began making everything about himself, and somehow managed to keep him relatively composed. They had my half-sister Emma, 12, a few years later. I believe that having a new family might prompt Dad to change, but he simply discovered new avenues to make everything revolve around him. I attended college in the same city to remain close to Emma. During my college years, Dad would only call when he required something or wished to discuss his own problems. When I graduated with honors, he delivered a speech at my graduation party about how my success was solely attributable to his excellent parenting and financial sacrifices. He barely acknowledged my actual achievements. Then I met Jack. He was unlike anyone I had ever dated. He was kind, patient, and genuinely listened when others spoke. Dad initially paid little attention to our relationship. He was preoccupied with some workplace drama he had instigated. When Jack and I became engaged last year, Dad's reaction surprised me. He appeared genuinely pleased and even offered to contribute to the wedding expenses. In retrospect, I should have realized it was too good to be true. Dad spent the entire engagement period informing everyone how he was the one who instilled high standards in me for choosing a partner. He would corner Jack at family gatherings and deliver lengthy monologues about how fortunate Jack was to be marrying into our family, completely disregarding the fact that Jack came from a wonderful family himself. The real trouble began 2 weeks before the wedding when Jack started experiencing severe headaches. After several medical examinations, doctors discovered a benign tumor that required removal. They assured us it was not immediately life-threatening, and we could proceed with our plans. The surgery was scheduled for 3 months after the wedding. Jack and I discussed it thoroughly and decided to go ahead with the wedding as planned. When I informed Dad about Jack's condition, expecting some support or concern, his reaction was entirely self-centered. He immediately began contacting everyone in the family, acting as if he was the most affected by the news. He called Jack's parents without our permission to discuss contingency plans and started telling people he might have to support me financially if anything happened to Jack. The day before the wedding, during the rehearsal dinner, Dad insisted on giving a speech. I was apprehensive but did not wish to create a scene by refusing. What followed was 20 agonizing minutes of him talking about himself. He began by recounting his survival of the divorce from my mother, moved on to how he built a successful career despite numerous obstacles, and then started weeping about how difficult it was for him to witness his daughter marrying someone with health issues. Jack's parents were visibly distressed. His mother had tears in her eyes, but not the joyful kind one expects at a rehearsal dinner. Jack sat there humiliated as my father essentially transformed his medical condition into a sob story about himself. Sarah attempted to get Dad to sit down, but he pushed her away and continued his monologue about how proud he was of himself for remaining strong through all of this. Emma, who was intended to be our flower girl, began crying due to the palpable tension in the room. When I finally rose and asked Dad to leave, he created an even greater spectacle. He started shouting about my ingratitude and how no one understood how challenging this was for him as a father. He actually uttered, "How do you think I feel having to walk my daughter down the aisle knowing her husband might not be around long?" The actual wedding day was even worse. Dad arrived intoxicated despite Sarah's pleas for him to remain sober. During the ceremony, when the officiant asked if anyone objected to the marriage, Dad stood up, swaying. Everyone froze as he announced that he needed to express his concerns about the timing of the wedding given Jack's health issues. He started rambling about his paternal duty to protect me from making a mistake. Security had to physically remove him while he yelled about being a concerned father who only desired the best for his daughter. The ceremony continued, but a palpable tension lingered in the air. Sarah departed with a crying Emma, profusely apologizing on Dad's behalf. That night, instead of celebrating our marriage, Jack and I had to contend with Dad's Facebook tirade about how his daughter chose a sick man over her father's wisdom and affection. I blocked him on all social media and my phone. Sarah persistently tries to mediate, stating, "Dad is just processing his emotions in his own way, and that I need to understand how difficult this is for him." Emma texts me, expressing how much she misses me and wishes for everyone to reconcile. Meanwhile, Dad has been telling our extended family that I am being cruel by cutting him off when he is merely worried about my future. Several family members have suggested I should forgive him because that is simply how he is, but I am done allowing him to make every situation about himself. This was meant to be about Jack and me embarking on our life together, not about him and his feelings. Update 1. It has been 3 weeks since the wedding debacle, and the situation has escalated in ways I never imagined. I believed blocking Dad on all platforms would grant us some peace, but he has discovered new avenues to insert himself into our lives and sow discord. Last week was Jack's pre-surgery consultation. We specifically refrained from informing anyone in Dad's family about the appointment to avoid any drama. However, Sarah somehow learned about it from Emma, who had overheard me talking to Mom about it on the phone. Sarah, thinking she was being helpful, told Dad about it, believing he deserved to know about his family. The consultation was scheduled for 10 a.m. Jack and I were seated in the doctor's office discussing the procedure details when Dad suddenly burst in. He hadn't even bothered to check in at reception. He He simply walked straight through, searching for us. The doctor was in the midst of explaining the surgical approach when Dad interrupted, demanding to know the actual survival rates and potential complications. The surgeon attempted to maintain professionalism and explained that the tumor was benign and the procedure was routine, but Dad would not listen. He kept interrupting with questions he had clearly sourced from WebMD, insisting that the doctor might be concealing something. He even produced his phone and began recording the conversation, stating he needed evidence in case anything went awry. Jack remained remarkably composed, but I could see his discomfort. The surgeon had to halt the consultation and summon security when Dad refused to leave. While awaiting security, Dad began crying and telling the doctor about how he had already lost so much in life and could not bear to see his daughter become a widow. The doctor appeared utterly bewildered as Dad continued about his own health problems and the stress this situation was causing him. Security finally arrived and escorted him out, but the damage was done. The hospital had to reschedule our consultation, and now they have flagged Dad as a security risk. We have had to arrange for additional security measures for the actual surgery day, which has added unnecessary stress to an already difficult situation. But Dad's interference did not cease there. A few days after the hospital incident, Jack was summoned to his boss's office. Apparently, Dad had been emailing and calling Jack's workplace repeatedly over the past week. He somehow obtained his boss's contact information, likely through some mutual acquaintance, and had been attempting to persuade them that Jack was too ill to work. Jack's boss showed us the emails. Dad had composed lengthy, detailed messages about how Jack was concealing the severity of his condition and how continuing to work might be fatal. He even suggested that the company might be legally liable if anything happened to Jack at work. He tried to pressure them into placing Jack on indefinite medical leave, claiming it was in everyone's best interest. Thankfully, Jack's boss is a reasonable person who knows him well. Instead of taking Dad's claims seriously, they immediately informed us of what was happening. But the incident left Jack feeling humiliated and concerned about his professional standing. He has worked diligently to build his career, and the last thing he needs is my father attempting to sabotage it. The situation became even more complicated when I discovered Dad had been meeting with a financial advisor. Sarah let it slip during one of her attempts to mediate between us. Apparently, Dad has been exploring ways to secure my future because he does not trust that Jack has adequate life insurance or savings. He has been telling the advisor and anyone who will listen that he needs to prepare for the possibility of supporting me financially when Jack inevitably becomes unable to work. The most infuriating part was discovering that Dad had contacted my mother. Mom lives in another state and has maintained minimal contact with Dad since their divorce. Last weekend, she called me in a panic, believing Jack was dying. Dad had called her with an exaggerated version of Jack's condition, claiming that I was in denial about the severity of the situation and required her intervention. It took me hours to calm Mom down and explain that while Jack's condition is serious, it is treatable, and his prognosis is good. She was furious when she realized Dad had manipulated her emotions merely to create more drama. Even after all these years, he still knows precisely how to provoke her. Emma has been caught in the middle of all this turmoil. She is only 12, but she is old enough to comprehend what is happening. She texted me yesterday, saying Dad makes her feel guilty whenever she mentions wanting to see me. He tells her that I have abandoned the family by choosing Jack over them, and that she should not get too attached to me because I might disappear like her mother did with her first family. Sarah continues to make excuses for him, saying things like, "That's just how he processes stress, and he really does love you in his own way." She expects me to forgive him and move forward because family should stick together. She even suggested that I should allow Dad to come to future doctor appointments because excluding him is only exacerbating his anxiety. I am at my wit's end. Jack's surgery is in 2 months, and instead of being able to focus on his health and recovery, we are constantly dealing with Dad's interference. The stress of managing Dad's drama while trying to prepare for Jack's surgery is becoming overwhelming. Every day brings a new crisis or attempt to insert himself into our lives, and I am running out of energy to cope with it all. Update 2. 2 months have passed since my last update, and we have uncovered something that casts all of Dad's previous behavior in an even more disturbing light. Sarah reached out to me privately last week, and what she revealed explains a great deal about Dad's extreme reactions to our situation. It began when Sarah was searching for some work documents on their shared home computer. She found a folder labeled Family Security that contained hundreds of audio files. Out of curiosity, she opened a few and was horrified to discover that Dad had been secretly recording our family conversations for the past year using his phone. He had recordings from family dinners, private conversations between Jack and me at their house, phone calls he had had with various family members about us, and even conversations from my bridal shower. The most disturbing aspect was not just the recordings themselves, but what Dad had done with them. He had been using audio editing software to cut and splice conversations, creating misleading versions that made it sound like I had serious doubts about marrying Jack. In one edited clip, he had taken a conversation where I was expressing normal pre-wedding jitters and combined it with comments I had made months later about being worried about Jack's health. The result made it sound like I was having second thoughts about the marriage because of Jack's condition. Sarah found dozens of these manipulated recordings on the computer. Dad had been playing these edited versions for family members, using them as evidence that I needed his intervention. He had even created a compilation that he had played for Jack's parents, attempting to convince them that their son was concealing the true extent of his illness from everyone. The recording included out-of-context snippets of Jack discussing his headaches before his diagnosis, edited to make his condition sound much worse than it is. When Sarah confronted him about the recordings, Dad did not even deny it. Instead, he tried to justify his actions, claiming he needed to document everything in case something happened to Jack, and I tried to blame him for not warning me. He showed Sarah a whole timeline he had created, mapping out every conversation and interaction, with notes about how they proved he was right about Jack's health being a reason to delay or cancel the wedding. Sarah was horrified by the extent of his deception. She finally realized that his behavior extended far beyond merely being overprotective or processing stress poorly. She packed some bags and went to stay with her sister, taking Emma with her. For the first time since I have known her, she is not attempting to excuse or justify Dad's actions. Emma called me crying the day after they left. She revealed that Dad had made her keep secrets, too. He would ask her to tell him whenever she heard me talking to Mom on the phone, and he would make her feel special by saying she was helping protect the family by reporting back to him. She feels guilty now, realizing he was using her to spy on me. The fallout from this discovery has been intense. When confronted by several family members, Dad doubled down on his position. He claims he did everything out of love and concern for me. In his mind, he is the hero of this story, a father doing whatever it takes to protect his daughter from making a huge mistake. He genuinely seems to believe that manipulating and editing these recordings was justified because it served his purpose of proving he was correct about Jack. Sarah is now considering divorce. She told me she has found other disturbing things since she started looking closer at Dad's behavior. Apparently, he has been keeping detailed notes about Jack's daily schedule, including when he goes to work and returns home. He even hired someone to follow Jack to and from his doctor appointments, claiming he needed to know if Jack was seeing other doctors or specialists that we were not telling the family about. The most recent development is that Dad has started sending these edited recordings to my mother's family members, attempting to gain their support. He has crafted a narrative where he is a concerned father being pushed away by his daughter, who has been brainwashed by her sick husband. Several relatives have called me confused and concerned after receiving these manipulated audio files from him. Update 3. It has been 6 months since the wedding, and I am finally ready to share how everything concluded. Jack's surgery was successful, and he has been recovering well. However, the drama with Dad persisted right up until the operation day and beyond. On the morning of Jack's surgery, Dad attempted to force his way into the hospital. Despite the security measures we had put in place, he appeared at 5 a.m., hoping to intercept us before the procedure. When security stopped him, he created a massive scene in the lobby, screaming about his rights as a father and threatening to sue the hospital. He even tried to convince the medical staff that he held power of attorney over Jack's medical decisions, presenting some obviously fabricated documents he had created. After being removed from the hospital, Dad filed a formal complaint against the facility, claiming they were denying him access to family during a medical crisis. He hired a lawyer to challenge the hospital's security protocols, arguing that as the father of the patient's wife, he had a right to be present. The hospital's legal team quickly dismissed his claims, but the entire incident added unnecessary stress during Jack's recovery period. Sarah filed for divorce last month. She finally reached her breaking point when she discovered Dad had been recording Emma's private conversations with her friends, supposedly to ensure no one was turning his daughter against him. She has moved in with her sister permanently and is fighting for full custody of Emma. The divorce proceedings have revealed even more disturbing behavior. Apparently, Dad had been monitoring Sarah's emails and phone calls for years, claiming it was for family security. Emma started seeing a therapist to deal with the impact of Dad's actions. She is struggling with trust issues after realizing how her father manipulated her into spying on family members. However, we have been working on rebuilding our relationship without Dad's interference. She spends every other weekend with me and Jack, and it has been healing for all of us. Dad's last attempt to control the situation came when he tried to convince our extended family that Jack was feigning his illness for attention. He created an elaborate presentation using WebMD articles and out-of-context medical terms, attempting to prove that Jack's symptoms did not match his diagnosis. When that failed to garner him the support he desired, he shifted tactics. Last week, I received a certified letter from his lawyer demanding I repay all the money he ever spent on me. The letter included a detailed list dating back to my childhood, encompassing everything from school supplies to the wedding contribution. He claims I breached the father-daughter contract by cutting him off and denying him his rightful place in my life. His lawyer also included a threatening note about going public with his evidence about Jack's deception if I did not comply. I have now obtained a restraining order against him. The evidence Sarah provided about his recording and stalking activities made the process straightforward. She has been incredibly supportive, sharing more information about his concerning behavior during their marriage to help strengthen the case. Dad's response to the restraining order was to send a mass email to everyone we know, claiming he is the victim of a conspiracy between his ex-wife, current wife, and daughter to destroy his reputation. Most family members have ceased taking his claims seriously, but he is still trying to find ways to contact us through distant relatives or mutual acquaintances. I am finally at peace with my decision to completely remove him from my life. Jack's recovery is progressing well, and we are focusing on building our future together. Sarah and Emma are doing better away from Dad's influence, and we are all healing from the damage he caused. Sometimes, severing ties with toxic individuals is the only path to finding peace, even if they are family.